Cadet McCusker.
I'm Cadet Wallace.
And today we're going to be talking to you about crime in Chicago and ways that we can predict crime and also reduce crime for the Chicago Police Department. Next slide, please. So for our agenda today, we're going to start off by doing some exploratory analysis in order to look into crimes in Chicago and see what's actually happening. The way we're going to do that is look at a general summary of crimes in Chicago, as well as a summary of research that we did in order to guide our analysis. And then we're going to discuss some hypotheses that we made in order to guide our research, and then talk about which data we used in order to do our analysis. Specifically, we're going to look at two trends in robbery, which we're going to discuss next, which are going to be our past trends and our income trends, and how those trends affect robberies in Chicago, specifically in distinct neighborhoods of Chicago. And then finally, we're going to go over some conclusions and a summary of the work that we went over. So the first thing we're going to start with is a general overview of the crimes in Chicago, and this is going to guide our research and hone in on what's important and how we're going to do analysis on crimes in Chicago. So specifically, we looked at the Chicago Police Department's website, and we looked at the page of all wanted fugitives in Chicago currently, and we scraped that data in order to find out what fugitives are wanted for in Chicago right now. Next slide, please. And what we come up with is this, and we see that currently the crime that most fugitives are wanted for in Chicago is robbery, and we can see that in the dark blue here. And based on this graph, currently robbery constitutes more than half of the crimes that wanted fugitives are wanted for right now, and that the Chicago PD is looking for. So we're going to focus this research specifically on robberies. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows a summary overview of robberies in Chicago, where the heat map represents where the most robberies are occurring. So as you can see, it's really concentrated here and here, which means that those areas are going to be the ones where the most robberies are occurring. We want to look more into these trends and figure out why this is happening in those specific neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So we did some research, and the research that we did was based on two factors. So the first factor was looking at past trends. So it said that the thing that will most predict what happens tomorrow is what happens today, and we wanted to look more into this specifically with robberies in Chicago. So this quote here says that the communities that were initially the most violent generally remain the most violent, meaning the communities that have the most robberies are going to remain the communities with the most robberies. So this is just saying that what happens in the past is probably going to be a good predictor for what happens in the future, specifically with robberies. Next slide, please. And then next we looked at income trends. So research has shown that areas with poor per capita income are going to have a higher amount of crime. So we wanted to look specifically at how per capita income can predict robberies in Chicago. So you can see here, robbery and assault are among the most commonly reported crimes in communities that are predominantly poor. So we're thinking that the more poor communities are going to have higher robberies. Next slide, please. So this leads us to our hypotheses. And our hypothesis for our first research factor is going to be that the past number of robberies will predict the future number of robberies in a community, meaning that they will have a positive relationship. And we're going to test this by looking at past years of data from years 2015 to 2017, and we're going to see how well that data predicts the number of robberies in 2018. And then we're going to use that to help guide a recommendation to the police department to look at trends for the year of 2019. And then our next hypothesis is with income trends, and our hypothesis for that is that higher incomes are going to have a lower number of robberies, so they're going to have a negative relationship, so that the poorer neighborhoods are going to have a higher number of robberies. Next slide, please. The data that we used was extracted from the Chicago Police Department's Enforcement Analysis and Reporting System. It's from 2015 to the present, and it has 22 columns, which include the type of crime that happened, the date that it happened, which neighborhood it happened in, the exact latitude and longitude that it happened, how violent the crime was, etc. It has over 6 million reported crimes, and 42,000 of them approximately were robberies, which we saw from that first slide that such a high number of them are robberies. So that's what we're going to be specifically looking at for our analysis.
So now looking at past trends, we have an average number of past robberies on this graph, and then our 2018 robberies here. And if you can see that up here, they're mostly identical. We have a high concentration of robberies on the outskirts in this neighborhood, and then also kind of an avenue of high crime going up until the lake right here. So we're starting to see more of a trend between the average past and what is basically current in 2018. So now, after performing linear regression model on this, we have yielded an adjusted R-squared of 0.915, which suggests a very strong positive correlation between past trends and what the current crime rates are, and a p-value very close to 0, which suggests that our hypothesis of A hat is the best fit for this model. Now, looking at income trends, we have high income neighborhoods here near the lake, and then lower income neighborhoods as you push out from the city center, which is common for a lot of metropolitan areas. Then what you also see is increasing robbery as you move out, as shown by the size of the dot. And so we're interested in getting more into depth in that part and seeing where that trend might prevail. So now, looking at the Shiny application we've developed, each dot on this graph represents a single robbery, and the slider starting at 90,000, which is probably hard to see, that covers all crimes, all per capita income. But if you slide it down to about 44,000 here, it's going to take a while to load. But I'll explain that here in the corner we have an income gradient, which leads us to have white areas for low income, and then darker blue for higher income. And if you hover over each individual dot, you can see exactly what community that it's in and the exact per capita income. So now that we've slid the input to have a lower income, we've eliminated some of the higher income neighborhoods, such as the one we saw earlier, which had high robbery rates but also high income. And now we're left with some of the periphery of the city, which has, we would suggest, higher rates of crime. So now, going back, we performed a linear regression model on this as well, but we did not see any sort of negative or positive correlation between income. Our adjusted R-squared value very close to 0, which suggested that there doesn't seem to be any sort of correlation at all. And we believe that this has been a result of the incredibly high robbery rates in a very high income neighborhood, but then also high crime rates in the low income neighborhood, which leads us sort of to a flaw of averages where you can't really see the true trends because the data are on both sort of extremes. So our conclusions here is that the past trends hypothesis was correct, that looking at past crimes is a good predictor for future crimes, and our income trends hypothesis was incorrect, meaning that we can't look just at the income level of a neighborhood to determine what sort of crime rates, or more specifically what robbery rates might be. Our suggestion for solving the past trends issue is to focus our police force intervention in these areas of high robbery from the past 3 to 5 years. Potentially put more stations, more community involvement. There's studies that suggest that having sort of a community buy-in and having sort of like a belonging to a neighborhood decreases crime rates, so maybe focus on that aspect for those neighborhoods. And then also for the income rates is to continue more research into income's effects on other crimes. There is research that has suggested a positive or a negative correlation between those two factors, but that's not what we discovered in this data.